There we are. We are now recording, and if everyone would kindly just wave at me to confirm that it's okay to record, that would be helpful to capture. Thank you very much. Okay, anything else, Maylin?
No, over to Robert.
All right, in that case, Robert, you are on, and this topic is of real interest to me personally, the UNDP and digital cooperation, because it feels to me like this is a place where there's lots of opportunity to create new infrastructure and to make the internet and digital technologies useful for more and more people in the world. So, Robert, what can you tell us?
Thanks very much, Vint and Maylin, as always, for convening us. These meetings, I agree with you, Vint. These are great meetings of the kind of broader community to come together and really share what's going on. And what I wanted to do this morning is just give you kind of an update on some of the things that I've spoken about before, which is this progress on the one of the roundtable processes for the Secretary General's Digital Cooperation Roadmap, and that's on the digital capacity building space. For those of you who have been on these calls before, you might recall bits and pieces of it, but essentially the roundtable is looking at 3 areas of action. One of them is being able to map where the digital capacity building supply is, and as well as the needs. Secondly, building a multi-stakeholder network out so that we can actually work to start to match make the supply with demand that's out there. And thirdly, looking at how we can strengthen capacity building support at a country level. And to that, there's some work being done with the UN country teams at each country and so on. But what I wanted to mention today is just kind of follow on and brief on where we stand with some of the capacity mapping and the multi-stakeholder network, because at the last time I presented, we talked about the database that we're putting together. Now, a number of you actually volunteered to speak to our team, and we're grateful for that. They enjoyed talking to you very much about the exciting initiatives that you have going on. So we gathered more information as a result of that. Now we're actually looking at how do we present this in an easy-to-use web interface. So that should be ready fairly soon in terms of being able to find a place you can navigate to see where people actually have capacity building capacities, if you will, or the ability to provide support to those who need it. We're doing some pilot testing now and things like that. We're doing that in partnership, as with all of these things, with the UN Tech Envoy's office at the UN Secretariat as well. The other thing, and so by the time we meet again, I hope that at least that sort of beta version will be up and ready to be navigated by everybody so we can start to see. And then, of course, we want to leave a door open for people to add to that as we go along. In parallel, we've been working on the multi-stakeholder network as a part of this. So we've been working with a small working group within the roundtable on the design. We've been kind of iterating and testing a bit. Again, by the time we meet next time, we should be in a state where we can actually have you kick the tires, if you will, look at what's going on, and help us out in terms of matching supply with demand for the capacity building effort. I think that's, I mean, like, as I said, I think the important message to leave you with perhaps is to say that, you know, we see these things as growing and evolving over time. So we'll be inviting more input into the mapping exercise, as well as looking for active members of the multi-stakeholder network that we're creating. And some of them can be involved in some of the piloting processes that we're doing as well. So if there's a particular interest on your part, please do let me know in the chat, and we'll pick that up and contact you later. So with that, Vint, I think turn back over to you. I know it was a short one this time, but just that's the status of where we are.
Well, thank you very much, Robert, for being so precise. Let me just ask a couple of questions, because we do have a little bit of time on the agenda. One of them has to do with the participation of funding agencies like the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank, among others, in the program, because in the end, capacity building often involves spending money, and it has to come from somewhere. The private sector, of course, should be part of that multi-stakeholder group, but does that figure in the discussions that you are anticipating?
Yes, and it hasn't been the primary, let's say, point of discussion, but we do have a number of donor member states, as well as some of the IFIs that are involved in the multi-stakeholder network. In terms of how do we support these things, what we're finding is that a lot of times there actually is already some support available. It's just that there isn't the kind of matching with the needs on the ground. In other cases, I expect that we'll need to leverage the network for, let's say, broader financing needs or fundraising or calling attention to funding needs. But I certainly the membership of the roundtable so far has, I would say, there's a reluctance to create a whole lot of new institutions to do this, which is why we're really linking things. But I think there's very much a willingness to look at how existing things can be supported in order to have an impact on the ground. And so I think it's an area that we can certainly draw on for the network.
I have one other question, but I'm going to hold it and see whether anyone else wants to ask Robert a question about where things stand.
Yeah, so Lynn here, just wondering for Mei Lin, does this fit into any of the kind of thing you're going to be talking about in Singapore in July in terms of the technology for good, et cetera?
Great. I will actually touch on that when you go into the calendar. So I'd like to turn it back to Vint, and then we'll go into the calendar and what's going to happen in Singapore. I think this is going to be of interest to people.
Great. Okay, so Robert, just one other observation. As you will probably know, the Network Startup Resource Center at the University of Oregon has been instrumental in bringing internet to many of the global South. And the nexus of that effort often is at a major university, often in a capital city. Linking the universities into the global academic research and education networks is often the beginning of significant build out into the rest of the country. So I don't know whether that's popped up as a modus operandi in your discussions, but I would draw that to your attention as well.
Thanks, Vint. We're actually a bit short on the academic institution side. So if there are some of those institutions you can push our way, please do. But so that hasn't come up in a significant way, as you're laying it out. Yet, but I agree with you that that's a kind of a natural, nationally based way of a platform to start building on. So if you do have those players, please let us know.
I will put you in touch with Stephen Hooter, the executive director of NSRC, Robert, and we'll see.
Great.
From that. Great. Well, thank you very much for a precise report. Next is Mei Lin, actually, to speak about the calendar. So, Mei Lin, now you have the opportunity to answer the previous question.
I'm going to present. So I am reviewing the calendar, which is in the link to it is in the agenda link. So you can actually go directly to the calendar yourself. And here it is. Are you seeing the calendar?
We did for a moment, and then it went away. But the link works. Oh no, that link is the agenda. That's not the one that you guys.
Let me
We're still
try again. It did present and then it went away. So let's try again. I'm sharing. You should be seeing yourselves.
It says you're presenting.
And then I'm going to show the calendar.
There we go.
See?
Yes,
Okay.
the calendar is there. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's so small.
Well,
Yes.
let's see. Is there? You can do several things to make that better. You could change if you change the layout to sidebar, for example. You'll get a little more room, and if you get rid of the chat, you'll get some more room as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for everybody else who's watching, in order to change the format, go to the the three little vertical dots in the bottom of the control bar will take you to a set of choices, one of which is change the layout of the screen.
Oh.
No, it's too big. Okay, sorry. Let's try 100%. Good. So I put a calendar in so that you all are aware what's going on. And I actually hope, Robert, that we can put some of the calendar events for the digital capacity building into this calendar so it can be a combined calendar for everyone. These are the events that I know of. I've put this in a kind of format which we're using within the people-centered internet, that there's time coordination, space coordination, trust coordination, inclusion, and do no harm. So we have 5 dimensions, and this is the time dimension. What we have within the people-centered internet is working with Achapalante in Puerto Rico over the next few months through to the end of the year. And then I want to draw everybody's attention to July. It's actually the 13th to the 16th. I just see that it's wrong. Asia Tech XSG. And you should be able to click on the link and go to it. I'm not going to do that. The Singapore Infocom Media Development Authority, which is both the regulator and the promoter of ICT in Singapore, is hosting this event, which is intended to be a hybrid in-person as well as online event. It's a really great place because they've recruited me to help to design it. So of course I've designed all the stuff that we're doing here so that Singapore can help to foster the discussions that are needed. Robert, I would really like to see the digital capacity building make a big splash at Asia Tech, and I'd like to follow up. But anyone else who is wanting to have things happen in Asia Tech, please be in touch with me, because the design of that conference, I'm able to help to do things. And of course, we want to highlight what the more digital economies and societies are doing, so as to actually use that as a starting place for what others could do, so they don't have to go through the trial and error of what Singapore and Estonia and Rwanda are already doing. But these series of dates mean that we can begin to build momentum over time, and that's the intention. You've heard from Michael Sung of Carbon Blue about digital finance, and Nitin Bhatia. So we are intending for SME financing and digital financing to actually demo in the Asia Tech at the World Economic Forum, together with OMFIF, the central bank think tank. And then in October, San Francisco, at the Palace of Fine Arts, there will be 5 weeks that we are coordinating with Planet Home to really bring this to Silicon Valley. And potentially, we hope to birth within the Asia Tech in Singapore, really a regional network where people focus on looking at interoperability and building blocks, can look at things at a regional level and keep coming together. So with that, I'm stopping sharing, but just to show how it's relevant to what we're talking about. The Building Resilient Communities with Digital Finance is what PCI is doing, and that's completely aligned with what we're doing here with the digital building block, where Germany and Estonia are taking the lead, and we'll be hearing from Martin Kavitz from Estonia later today. And Singapore and India are starting to join, and Kate Wilson will be talking about that. So that's the calendar update, and back to you, Vint.
Well, thank you so much, Mei-Lin. Wow, that's just a whole lot going on. I'm very impressed. It seems like you started from not a whole lot into an incredible amount. You should double check to see whether that October-November period overlaps with the Internet Governance Forum. It feels like it might, and we Perhaps we should be conscious of that.
Will do.
Yeah, thank you. So our next speaker is Kate Wilson from the Digital Impact Alliance. And Kate, I think we have some slides for you, assuming that you're with us. You have the floor for the next, how many minutes? 10 minutes. More than 10, actually. It looks to me like it's a half an hour. Is that?
Yes, that was the arrangement that, Kate, are you on? And
I am on.
good, super. You get to present.
And just double checking you can see.
Yes, it's coming up. Now we can see it. That's good. Thank
Great.
you, Kate. All right, you're on for half an hour.
Well, hopefully it'll be more discussion than me talking for half an hour. But thank you all so much for taking the time. As Robert said, I always enjoy these conversations so much because we get to really share what each of us is doing and think about how each of these activities add up to more than the sum of its parts. My name is Kate Wilson. I'm the CEO of the Digital Impact Alliance. We are a think, do, replicate tank housed in the United Nations Foundation, which supports causes associated with the UN, based in Washington, D.C. What I want to actually talk about today is less what are we doing, although I will touch on a couple of efforts that we're doing with colleagues who are on the call, but really talk more about why we're all working towards digital transformation and national digital transformation, and really propose to this group of leaders, is there a recipe or a formula that we should be following as we think about all the things that we are each individually doing? And how do we better share kind of what we're doing so that the sum of each of our parts sums up to more to actually benefit the most vulnerable? Well, I've worked in tech for, over 25 years, probably longer than I really want to admit. I've actually cooked for longer than that. And so as I've tried to explain over the years, sort of the value of enterprise architecture of things, I've started to think about it, instead of maybe explaining it in such a way that it's like, here are all the components of a national digital architecture that are required, really starting to think about it more like the components of a recipe. What are the key ingredients that are needed? And even when you innovate separately by place, how do those recipes build upon each other? And how do you learn from what somebody else has tried, a tip or a trick that somebody has tried? And so today, what I really want us to reflect on as a group is, what are the recipes that we are each trying? And how can we share those better and more effectively to actually accelerate all the work in national digital transformations and responsible data use that we're each doing? So that's sort of our topic for today. So why does this matter, right? We're facing a completely a new and complex world in which all of these problems that are hitting us actually have complete dependencies: environment and climate to hunger, how we think about a national power grid with broadband access, how we think about health and human well-being, and our need to have digital tools to actually help infuse that. Industry and infrastructure cannot be divorced from what we're doing. All of these are completely related. And we've seen in multiple cases where national digital infrastructure has proven key, not just in COVID response over the last year. That lesson has been, basically beaten, I think, into all of our brains. But really, that they've also proved key to how we think about dealing with education, how we think about, actually providing agricultural services, how we think about looking at solving benefit transfer problems that have existed. And these countries, a few which are listed here, some of which are on the call, have invested in national digital transformation over decades, were really quickly able to adapt to COVID's challenges. What we don't all know, though, is which factors mattered most, and in what order should we apply them in order to achieve national digital transformation? Because each of these countries took a very different journey to actually achieve it, but all have proven some sort of the way, still continuing to be able to provide services to their citizens. Add to that COVID-19 has now turbocharged others' digital plans. I was speaking to a colleague at the World Bank a few months ago, and they indicated that they had more requests for support around national digital transformation than ever before. colleagues at Smart Africa, this is the key equation that everyone is looking for. We're going to see an acceleration around this, but countries and donor agencies and many private sector companies and NGOs, we're all struggling. Where do we actually start? And we don't have decades to do this if we really want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and actually make sure that we can reach everyone everywhere. So we started thinking at Dial in October of 2019, which elements are most needed to reach everyone, and how do we actually accelerate the pace at which we are able to reach everyone everywhere? That means that we need to change our approach. In digital development, really that sector of development that is focused primarily on digital tools and services, in the 2007 and 2019 time period when I sort of started and moved over from tech, private sector tech, over into development, we have taken this approach of investing in sectors. We have health solutions that build up entire health infrastructure. We have education solutions that build up entire education solutions. We have agricultural solutions. But a lot of that is building in background tech that are really platform tech that is not necessarily appropriate to be embedded in a sector. In this new time period, you've seen a call towards greater interoperability and how we really link digital platforms and policies together. We're starting to see emerging interest in things like how do we build a national ID, how do we put data on top, but we're still treating them as separate and discrete topics. We're not actually linking them together as a national infrastructure that sits on top of critical connectivity infrastructure, which we're definitely not done with yet. And then finally, how do we really think about enabling full digital transformation and all the things that are required with that in order to achieve a digital society? But most importantly, provide services that can reach everyone everywhere, probably enabled through a digital tool. So one of the things we're trying to figure out is which of these recipes from the countries that we've seen, but many others that also exist, work best, and how do we better share our work across each of these groups? So forums like this are great for actually sharing what we are each doing, but how do we align them so it actually, adds up to more than the sum of its parts? So we have a basic hypothesis, which I'm sharing to test with you all, and would really like to hear from you, which parts of this resonate, which parts don't. We think that if more countries can demonstrate their digital and data transformation investments, improve service delivery, and that we actually have quantifiable proof about that. If national and global development actors can align our investments to support countries' digital and data needs, and that in turn, with new financing, can align the demand to stimulate the increased supply and usage of fewer and safer proven digital solutions. Because our time for investing in thousands of things is done. We have to start consolidating around fewer proven platforms that can actually take place. That does not mean a one-size-fits-all approach. I want to be very clear here. But just in the same way that there are not thousands of platforms that actually are being used across countries in order to grow, we don't need thousands of platforms any longer in digital development. The goal of that then is that new countries can accelerate their own digital transformation and responsible data use journeys driven by them and not by others from external sources. We've seen that there are 4 key ingredients to this recipe that we think need to be considered. We often touch on these one by one, but we think that all 4 are critical. We think it's essential that there is a policy framework that's being driven and developed in line with the products that are being developed, and that those 2 things cannot be divorced. Policies that just regulate products that have already been built don't work terribly effectively and just lead to increased friction between private sector actors who are critical in this journey and policymakers who are seeking to sort of control and protect their citizens. We think it's critical that we have better pricing and procurement of the solutions that are in place to actually make it more accessible to everyone who's agreed. And we think that people are the most critical resource of all that are actually going to be required for digital transformation, and that we must all figure out new ways to invest in digital literacy. The product elements I want to touch on because they're so key and they're so much a part of this group. The base layer upon which all of this is built, the cake that we all need to build, is essentially connectivity, power, and this capacity. Those are the 4 critical base layers that must be there no matter what. We then think that there are core national ID, data, and finance infrastructure layers that actually need to be built so that you have a back-end platform in the same way that you would build any platform in the private sector that basically can identify who the user is, who can make sure that the data that's flowing through the system is safeguarded, and that there's a way to actually make payments into the system. Those are the first key things that you build when you build any private sector platform and a tech company. Why are we not doing the same things and investing in these at national level? Then on top of that, we open up an innovation ecosystem and set of APIs that allow others to build new innovations on top of it. These are the toppings on the cake that actually are required. And we think if we work together to get these 4 base ingredients right, we can build this base cake together. So how can we work together, and what are some of the elements that we think need to take place? And I want to be clear, to us, this is not just NGOs or just the UN system or just the private sector. It is critical that we all work together and that we bring citizen interest and the principles for digital development, their base layer, actually as part of this. We think at global level, we need to align our digital and data investments. We need to actually understand which of these are working and how, and then be able to extrapolate out those lessons and use them elsewhere. We think we need to pool this financing for national infrastructure in a more coordinated way so that we don't have efforts to pool connectivity in one place and efforts to pool investment in digital health in a different location. Only by bringing together some of these investments can we really align how they're going to be used and how they're going to operate. That, we believe, will drive new technical solutions that will take place. Those new technical solutions can then be used by countries as they agree on this national digital and responsible data use strategies and design their people-first digital policies and develop their own local innovations. This is a continuous cycle that we hope can more creatively and innovatively actually accelerate this pace towards digital transformation. Some areas that we think we can align immediately upon. One, I'd love to just take some time now to actually share feedback on this hypothesis and areas where you're already working. We'd like to reuse and encourage others to reuse the ITU DIAL SDG Digital Investment Framework, which maps what some of these critical cross-sector building blocks are, built on real use cases that have come from countries and the architectures that already exist within those countries. We would encourage you to contribute proven solutions to the DIAL Solutions Catalog. This is a catalog that scrapes information from across the web and lifts up and tries to provide to policymakers, whether that be at a country, within the UN system, could be within a company, what already exists that doesn't need to necessarily be reinvented. And then we encourage you all to join the working group formed by Estonia, Germany, ITU, and DIAL, and our reference implementation efforts. So I'd like to just pause there and sort of open this up for questions to understand, how others feel about this recipe.
So, Kate, it's Vint. Thank you very much for a succinct presentation. One thing that occurs to me, you mentioned, too many platforms. It makes me think of Larry Page when he was CEO of Google, kept saying, more wood behind fewer arrows. But I do want to suggest something to you which allows for proliferation while not losing the ability to interwork, and that's making heavy use of standards. One of the, I don't mean to beat this too heavily, but one of the reasons we can have so many different things and entities and organizations and everything else part of the internet ecosystem is because they all operate according to a set of commonly held and well-tested standards. And so I don't want to lose that particular mechanism for a good portion of what you're trying to accomplish. It's not that there are too many platforms, it's just that there are too many uninteroperable ones. And so that would be one place where I would put a few bets in order to achieve commonality while not necessarily constraining ingenuity.
And we completely agree. This is for the spirit of the presentation. We left it much more high level, but there's a lot more work on the standard side than is actually represented there. But very much noted. Fair point.
I have other comments, but let's wait and see whether there are others who would like to jump in and react to what you presented so far.
I think Henrik has raised his hand. Henrik, the German digital envoy.
Yes, do I have the floor?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, and thank you, Kate, for this very inspiring presentation. And of course, I'm honored and flattered to be, let's say, from a country that is spearheading one of the working groups on this very important strategy. But just a question on the kind of approach you're undertaking, because you said we should demonstrate and share what has worked best in our national systems, and perhaps give others the opportunity to learn from there and support them to implement similar policies. This is how I understood. But if I look at the issues that we are currently facing in our national digital transformation strategies and efforts, I sometimes wonder whether there's a lot of knowledge that we have to share. We do not even have a national ID as it stands of today. So there are many issues that we are still grappling with, and we don't want to expose them internationally, saying, well, go and ask the same futile questions without any outcome for the next 5 years. So I'm wondering, is this the best approach? Because it could mean that some of the classical developed countries would still wait and say, well, I have to sort this out for myself. I don't have a clear vision now, so let's wait until we can help others. The other idea that I would have, and I voiced this in a conversation with Mei Lin a couple of weeks ago, is if we look at Agenda 2030, and we see when we talked about it, when we elaborated it 6 years ago, we didn't have a clue how important digital transformation would be today, and it might still be more important in the future. Would it be a worthwhile effort to just think about and let's say do some brainstorming about a fictional SDG 18 that could say we complement the Agenda 2030 virtually by looking at what does it mean in terms of challenges and opportunities for digital transformation. This would allow us not only to wait until we have the final recipes for ourselves and share them with others, but to embark on this path jointly and to have joint efforts to face the challenges. Thank you.
No, I think that's a fantastic point, and I completely agree. And again, probably the spirit of brevity maybe misconstrued the point. It's almost like we're trying to cook something that nobody's done well, right? There's no Michelin star for this, and there's no country in the world who's actually gotten this right, even the ones that I put up. Each of us have taken sort of a different journey or in different places for a journey. And in fact, I don't think of this as a developed world sort of different problem. We're all figuring this out at exactly the same time. And we're trying to reach a destination and let's say, utopia or like the perfect recipe that nobody actually has figured out. So it's more critical than ever that we share the components and the strategies that we're trying to get to something that's a little bit better. And I share your fear. Like I won't comment on Germany, obviously, but I will comment on my own country, and I can certainly say we haven't figured this out and we haven't gotten it right. So it's more critical than ever that we look for innovation wherever it may sit, anywhere in the world. And we don't say that's exactly right for us, but we say, what are the components that they tried? Which ones worked? What did they learn from? What did they think they could have done better? And how could we improve on it in our own experiment? When we looked at this and started looking at this in October of 2019, we found at least, my colleague Mary Jo is on the call, so she'll probably correct me, it was like somewhere between 17 to 22, just in development, definitions of national digital transformation, what was required. We don't have a shared definition of what even the components are and what order they need to go in and how we actually adjust them and which ones matter most. So we're spending a lot of money and time figuring this all out, but we're not actually sharing how that works. It's a little bit like probably the first people who tried to I'm a terrible baker. I don't like to bake, but I've been trying a little bit during COVID, right? You know, and I was like, I don't really know why I need to put in yeast versus flour versus blank, and like in what degree the water has. It's like we're trying to all figure this out at the same point in time because nobody's ever done it. So I'm just encouraging us to learn from that, not stand any of our countries up as the answer, but really being honest about which aspects worked and which aspects didn't, and in what order do we wish we had tried them.
So,
hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I think Robert has his hand up, and then I wanted to react to what you just said. But Robert, you have the floor.
Thanks, Vint, and thanks for giving me the floor again. And I don't have a question for Kate, but I wanted to speak in support of what Kate's doing and what the work that Dial is doing, because as UNDP, we've excuse me, from across the 170 countries where we're present, we see a high demand for support on digital transformation. I mean, that's probably a given, especially in light of COVID. But what we see is a lot of appetite for moving from that project or tactical level to the strategic level, meaning what does it mean for a whole of society, or at least a whole of government approach to digital transformation. So with Kate and Dial's help, we've leveraged a bunch of the best practices and experiences that they've had to work on our own kind of approach, which is really a kind of a starting point of dialogue with governments to really sit down and say, looking across your society, where do you have, let's call them gaps or weaknesses, and where do you have things already built, and how can we move toward a kind of a reference model, which is getting to what Kate is talking about as well, of starting with our ambition and strategy. What is it that we can draw on for best practices around the world that have been done elsewhere? Not perfectly, because I agree with Kate, no one is perfect, but we can distill some fundamental components here. And some of those are a part of that government stack that Kate is talking about. For us, we also want to inject this, the people first inclusiveness of all of this, really putting inclusion of all parts of society at heart, the rural, urban, disabled, indigenous population, so on and so forth, because this is where we see the real value in the digital transformation, if it can reach everybody in society. And then when we have that strategic dialogue, then we can have the discussion about, well, what does it take to use digital public goods or open source solutions to solve your challenge versus a proprietary solution, and what are the pros and cons? And how would we go about procuring that? How would we go about financing that? And really importantly, to your point, about how do we become interoperable? What are the advantages of being interoperable with our neighbors in the region or globally, or at least across government? So just a comment in strong support of this. I agree with the hypothesis that Dial is putting forward, and we are actively working in support of the overall effort. And Mei Lin, maybe that's something that at a subsequent meeting, I can come back and present the UNDP approach that it's being iterated right now.
You'd certainly be welcome to do that, Robert. It's Vint again. Kate, I wanted to draw your attention to what I believe to be a fact, and that is that this whole digital transformation process is very dynamic, and we are not all going to end up at the same place at the same time. We see the transformations occurring at different paces and in different ways. For example, a large part of the world has gone heavily into mobile smartphones more quickly than we did in the US. And so our base was, laptops and pads and things of that sort. And only more lately did we end up with a large number of smartphones. So the conditions will vary from one place to another, and it's not stable, it's dynamic. So that's one thing to worry about, or be conscious of. Second thing is that context really counts here. And we will find readiness varying quite dramatically from country to country, region to region. And understanding readiness, whatever that means, and however you measure it, I think is very important, because we'll find different choices have to be made in order to create infrastructure to build the cake that you were describing. And so again, it's very important not only for people to say this is what we did and this is what happened, but the context in which it was done is equally important. So Estonia, for instance, which is held out quite justifiably as a heavily digitized state, was able to do this for a number of different reasons, not least of which is a very small population in relative terms, and therefore they could literally do whatever it was they were going to do for every single citizen in the country, because it was scaled, what they were doing scaled adequately to every single person. And it's amazing what you can get away with if you can say 100% of the country is prepared, is ready for whatever the next step is. So I think these are important elements in our sharing of experience, so that we don't accidentally think that because it worked in case A, it's going to work in case B, C, D, and E.
This is Mei Lin, and I'm going to just jump in. I see Kristen has her hand up, but I want to bring forward the role of the National Research and Education Networks. These networks of academic institutions were instrumental in getting the internet out. They should be part of this next digital transformation. Just one example is, for example, if we connected all the schools through the National Research and Education Networks, they could make sure porn doesn't go through to the schools. There's a lot of sort of knowledge and expertise in the educational and research networks already in each country. And if we try to just go straight to the government and top down it, and I'm not saying that you are, but the academic, the IEEE engineers, they come to me and they say, we have expertise in Zambia, but nobody asks us. They go to IEEE in New Jersey and ask for the global expert. And then the global expert comes back and tells us, how are the conditions over here? And there's this kind of weird via New York City thing that's going on, where in fact, global expertise is distributed in the National Research and Education Networks. Kate and Robert, I'm interested in your thoughts.
I couldn't agree more with Vint and with your point, Malin, and that's actually in part why we started from sort of the country demand place. Despite the way I look or sort of where I happen to physically sit at this moment in time, I've worked with over 35 governments on sort of various aspects of this, and I have dealt with rats chewing through cabling and had to rewire entire groups, so like in multiple locations in multiple countries, and sort of I have a lot of ground truth that I'm lifting this up as a theory, but I have a lot of ground truth that brings this forward. And I truly believe that each country will have a different way in which they do it. Every place is different, and the local dynamics always drive this, always. And there are also components that are really critical and that are true in every piece of tech that has ever been built. And people don't know that. So I'm trying to find a way to look both the bottoms up and the top down and bring them together in a different way to actually have a different conversation to cut out some of the cycle time. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that they're not going to still have a discovery journey. I'm just trying to shorten that journey from decades in India, decades in Estonia, decades in Singapore, and trying to shorten the time period at which they can move through that journey by understanding and being able to articulate more clearly what actually mattered and in what order. Because in the same way, that's sort of why I landed on kind of the recipe. It's like if I bake a piece of bread, it's completely different than Robert's, it's completely different than Maylin's, it's completely different than what you would find in Singapore, because all of the components are slightly different. But they still have a common formula. And we're just trying to figure out what that common formula is, to what degree we can. And then 30-40% of it is going to be very unique to the place.
I think that's right. We're running out of time, but I'd like to give Kristen an opportunity to react. So Kristen, you have the floor.
Great, thanks, Vint. It occurs to me, I'm coming from the evaluation space. I worked at the World Bank as an evaluator for about 15 years. And while evaluation is kind of a slow process, traditionally, I feel like the cycle time is speeding up, and it's even coming into sort of the innovation end of things. So things from the evaluation world are looking better and better. And I feel like a lot of the organizations that are working on these issues will also have evaluations of their own work. And maybe there's a way to coordinate among evaluation departments lessons learned. Just throwing it out there, because there is that sort of network. And that might be worth exploring. You know, if we are going to be measuring and evaluating, can we coordinate on what we're looking at? So just thought, thanks.
That's a great point, Kristen. It's actually one of the things we are actually sort of recommending, is that if we can agree, but you have to be able to agree first on what are the components you're measuring. And so, but we're very interested in that.
Thanks so much, Kate and Kristen. Sorry, I had to jump up and answer a political call asking for money. So I'm sorry, you finished, Kate? Okay, in that case, thank you so much for keeping us very nearly on time. I think our next speaker is Lang Lim on the subject of digital ASEAN in a historical cultural context. There are slides involved. Lang, if you're with us, you have the floor. Well, I see Lang is here, but you're muted right now.
Hi, yes, I'm not muted. So I go to present, and what do? I choose a window. Is that what I do? Or
That's right. You say present, and then you choose a window, or possibly a if it's in your browser, if it's a a tab in the browser, you can select the tab.
I'm setting a tab.
Okay. So you're able to pick a tab.
No, it's not in the tab. I have it as a PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. Then there should be a window open, and you should be able to say select a window. This is always a problem with all these different.
This is the first time.
If it's a big problem, I can present for you.
Could you present for me?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm not just, I don't use Google Meet, and so.
Well, that's too bad. We should fix that. Okay, great. We have metaphors on the screen.
Wonderful. And you can put that on the, yeah. So while Mei-Lin turns this into a slide view, because now it's just,
it's still editing.
Yeah, let me just introduce myself. So this is my second time on it. It's been enormously interesting. Something about my background. I trained first as a theologian at Harvard, and then I went into the business.
Wow.
And so I do a number of things. I'm Singaporean. I've become an American citizen. I'm now living in Indonesia with my fingers in a few things, leadership developments. Digital is what Mei-Lin has dragged me into, which I'm not kicking and screaming. It's really very compelling. But I want to bring our attention to the kind of unconscious metaphors which shape us. Metaphors in words, in images, as well as in stories. Next, Mei-Lin. So, of course, what we have here is the American frontier and the early days of the land grab. And it's in the unconscious way we have thought about discovery, right? Few brave souls go out there. They must survive above all else. And then others follow suit, and then they establish trading posts and built on what others have done. So AOL is gone, and then we have other things. But you all know this whole history that has affected all of us for the last 20-odd years. But implicit is that the digital world is a frontier, and it's up for grabs, and it's heroic. and we push forth. And when I was at HB, Harvard Business School, it was about creative destruction. These are all the implicit metaphors we use, and we accept them as truthful and real and valid and the only ones around. The only metaphors around. Next, Neil. Now, other pioneers have followed along with these same metaphors, but things are beginning to change, right? So mobile cash pioneered in Kenya, for example. There are 4 unicorns here in Indonesia. Some of the most digitalized economies are ones you guys have spoken about. But I thought it'd be very interesting to show a different kind of pioneering work, which is beggars in China with a QR code, because cash has disappeared. Okay. So they're pioneers, but they're doing it differently. Now, if we go back to this land grab, there was, and the next slide.
Okay.
Right. COVID-19, new land grab. Well, let's be careful with the metaphors that are operating. Because is that really the best metaphor? So here again is Lady Columbia, progress, you see that in Metropolitan Museum, right? And she's moving from east to west. And if you just look at the left side of this picture, I mean, this is a real picture, right? She's just chasing out the people of color and the indigenous flora and fauna. And for a long period of time, this was an acceptable picture. This was what America was up to. You know, this was good. Right? Because this was unconsciously accepted as the narrative. But of course, now we look at this picture and we look at this whole history of the land grab, right, with some critical lens, because it did lead to destruction and annihilation. And in fact, the land was not terra nullius. Right? It was, in fact, a projection upon the real reality. So there's a real reality here that was ignored. Okay, next one. Neil. So just think about Southeast Asia. Different metaphor altogether. This place was not colonized. It was settled by people from all over the world, where Mei Lin and I have come from. And if you kind of think about it, you know, this is a place where all of the different old civilizations have lived together for about at least 1,000 years. The Christians have been here before even America was founded. The Buddhists have been here for 1,500,000 years. There are 100 million communists living cheek by jowl next to 80 million Christians in the Philippines. Now, one of the things here is a value called consultation and consensus, which Indonesians have pioneered. And so in April, they are inviting the head of the junta in Myanmar, who's just conducted the coup, to come for a meeting, right? The EU is upset. The Americans are upset because you should not invite a murderer. But it's a whole different ethos of continuing conversation. Next one. I'm just conscious of time. So if you want to kind of begin to think about a different way to think about things, a whole different set of metaphor, I recommend Wang Gangwu, his OBE university professor. But he sort of said that the people in this region have never centralized, never turned it into an empire until the Europeans arrived, because of a different sensibility. It's been 17,000 islands, right? And they've traded. They've just traded. And they've resisted centralization like China. They've resisted bureaucratization like Europe under the church. They've remained autonomous, but they cooperate. And it is incredibly diverse in a way that resists classification. And yet today, ASEAN is the most economically dynamic region of the world, is poised to grow, right? It's Europe's largest trading partner, I believe. It's China's largest trading partner. So it's really quite, maybe not Europe's, but it's China's largest trading partner. It's really quite amazing that a place that isn't centralized and bureaucratized actually can be so prosperous. So I've done my time. Next slide. You know, is it a trade metaphor rather than a land grab metaphor? And if not trade, what other metaphors and narratives might drive us as we talk about this unfolding future? Thank you.
Wow. Well, that was a fantastically visual presentation. Thank you so much for that, Lang. And it certainly makes me think harder, given the history that you captured. We actually have a moment or two if there are people who would like to react and respond to this, especially those of you who have lived in that region and have some experience with it, as Lang now does.
I actually want to call on Kate. Kate Wilson has tremendous experience with ASEAN. And one of the reasons I called on Lang to do this was because of a conversation Kate and I had to prepare for this meeting. Kate.
We found many parallel lives, I guess, or people in common, I guess. So, Lang, I really appreciate that. I started my career working in ASEAN trade, actually. So spent a lot of time and was based out of Singapore for quite some time. I think it's a really interesting metaphor, but I also think it's the right style of sort of cooperation for what we're doing about, which is each country within ASEAN of the 10 member nations can pursue its own agenda, but it finds and reinforces the power of the others and listens to the power of the others. And so there's a dynamic which allows it to thrive as a group because they recognize that only together, that working together, they are stronger. And that helps even when you have, the fourth largest nation in the world in Indonesia balanced against the economic powerhouse, which is Singapore, which then has Malaysia to the side of the Philippines. So you can balance out what the power is. And I think that many of these regional cooperation groups are going to prove key for when countries that are maybe not the size of China are moving forward, and that they're going to be the innovators in this.
So it's Vint. There's an interesting analog of the train analogy, and that's the internet. If you think of every network in the internet as if it's train tracks, and you think about interconnecting the train tracks together, which is peering in the internet case, what you end up is reinforcing everybody's utility in the system because everybody gets to use everybody else's train tracks. The whole point being to expand the connectivity of the system in order to expand trade and travel and everything else. So maybe that train analogy is not a bad one. And just thinking for a moment about Mei Lin's comment about the National Research and Education Networks, a similar kind of thing arises there because the construction of those networks per country is enhanced dramatically when they become interconnected and become the avenues through which information is shared, knowledge is shared, education is expanded, and then becomes the sort of the seed from which a lot of other infrastructure can grow. So I think that Lang's analogy here, or his metaphor, will serve us well, at least surely in the base of the layer cake that Kate is giving to us.
May I very quickly put in a sensibility? There's also a sensibility in ASEAN where people are not really purists and yet can keep a sense of themselves. So a story is told that when Duterte, who is president of the Philippines, hosted a meeting for, I think, China, US, and the EU, you would imagine that he would present something from his country's Catholic tradition. Instead, he presented something from the Ramayana.
That's interesting. That really is interesting.
So there's a sense that I think needs to be absorbed. That's also in the food and emerging. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lang. No, these kinds of metaphors are very helpful to encourage our breadth of thinking. Well, we're now on another schedule here, and that is this is really important from Thierry Geiger and Alex Wong, and that's metrics and baselines for meaningful connectivity. And I want to thank them both for taking time to talk to us about this, because it is part of the whole question of readiness and measuring readiness and understanding where are we in terms of being able to implement some of the applications that are driving the interest in digitization. So it looks like, Alex, you are ready to jump in. So
Yep.
I'll turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Vint. Thank you, Mei Lin. So as this group knows, we periodically give an update on the work of the Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation. So this is the work that's in the context of the Universal Connectivity Working Group that ITU is chairing with UNICEF. So if you go to the next slide, Thierry. So a reminder, the Digital Cooperation Roadmap has these 8 topics. And our colleagues from UNDP, Robert and Minerva, periodically also give an update on the capacity development, capacity building working group, which is the 4th bullet down. But we're going to talk about the Universal Connectivity Working Group. As you can see, it's the first bullet listed here, achieving universal connectivity by 2030. Next slide. Again, as also perhaps presented in previous calls, the 5 action areas that have been identified within the Global Connectivity or the Universal Connectivity Working Group are listed here as follows. Establishing the baseline. So that's what we're going to talk about. Convening a group of investors and financing experts. That's number 2. Number 3, promoting new and potentially transformative models, such as the GIGA initiative. And I haven't forgotten that I owe Vint to you and this group the update on NRENs as a potential connectivity model. That we've just begun that work with Boston Consulting Group, by the way, so we can maybe have that presented in a future meeting. The 4th is around the regulatory environments, especially focusing on small scale providers. And the 5th is around emergency preparedness. But we're going to focus and zoom in on number 1, the baseline. And this is a working group that we asked our colleague at the ITU, Thierry, who heads our statistics division, to lead. And he kicked that work off in December, I believe, last year. So Thierry, over to you to give an update. And the good news is we still have time for more inputs. This is not finalized yet, but we've done a lot of great work. So over to you, Thierry. Thank you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, so basically, Alex just presented those key actions, and our working group is tasked with delivering on key action number 1. And the way we're going to deliver is basically through 4 steps. The first is to develop a framework for universal and meaningful digital connectivity. It's a mouthful, but that's what we're after, building on the existing work out there. Second, we're going to identify the main enablers of connectivity, the expected outcome for each enabler, and I'll come back to it in a minute. And importantly, we're going to select indicators that measures those enablers. So basically, that collectively measure meaningful digital connectivity. Equipped with those indicators, we're going to compute this baseline. So basically, the baseline tells us where countries stand today in terms of connectivity and how far they are from the state of meaningful connectivity. Then, as a final step, we will set targets for some of these indicators, and those targets will tell us where we ought to be by the end of the decade. So there is today and 2030, and that's basically the ambition for this working group. We are completing at the moment. We almost done with step 2, which is about the selection of indicators, and we will hopefully soon move to the step 3 about computing the index. So this is our framework. So first step was to come up with a framework building on the great work that has been out there. And I'm sure that it won't come as a surprise, the elements that you see on the screen now, but we define meaningful digital connectivity as the ability of individuals to connect to the internet in a meaningful way. While basic connectivity is merely about the possibility of connecting, here we're talking about, when it comes to meaningful connectivity, it's about the opportunity. Why would you connect? Why I go online? Because there's things to do, because I can do it safely, I can do it cheaply, etc., etc. Meaningful connectivity is basically what makes the online experience enriching, pleasant, and meaningful, although this word is subject to interpretation. So meaningful connectivity depends on a number of factors. We call them the enablers, and you have them on the right here. You have the main categories of enablers, starting with infrastructure all the way to safety and security. And those enablers need to be in place and need to be at certain state of advancement in order to claim that a country has reached a state of meaningful connectivity. And importantly, in this framework and definition, there is the notion of universality. There is no meaningful connectivity without universality. So we know that connectivity in rural areas or for a happy few will not yield those societal and economic impact that connectivity can bring. So we really throughout the exercise we keep an eye on universality, and it will be reflected in the indicator that we pick, and I'll come back to it in a minute. Importantly, the framework adopts a human-centric approach, which means that we focus on the people and the household as opposed to the businesses and the government. And we also focus on those enablers as opposed to the levers. So the levers are the things that you can do, such as policies, investments, the regulation you can enact, those things that you can do to improve on these various enablers and eventually reach connectivity and meaningful connectivity. But in this exercise, we focus on the enablers, the state of the enablers, and we're not looking at the levers. The framework is agnostic about how you reach meaningful connectivity. I mean, we prescribe the categories that matter for meaningful connectivity, but we don't tell you, or the framework will not tell you how to improve on these various enablers. And that's important, and it's deliberate that we're doing that. We don't believe there is a one-size-fits-all recipe to improve on these different categories. And we believe that it's already valuable to tell you where you are and where you ought to be in the future without telling you how to get there, because it's a separate exercise. It's an ambitious exercise. It should be done at the country level. So that's not the goal of this exercise. So just next slide is about trying to make it a bit more concrete when we talk about these different enablers. So what we're trying to do is when we talk about infrastructure, what we will try to capture is whether connectivity is available, or that would be the basic connectivity. Yes, there is signal. Yes, the whole population is covered, but is the connection fast? Is it reliable? That would be the meaningful connectivity. So that's different states. Affordability, critical for connectivity. Having affordable connectivity is good for basic connectivity, but in order to reach meaningful connectivity, we want ICT to be cheap. You can have an access to a device, but if you really want to make the full use of connectivity, you better own a device, or be it a smartphone or a computer, etc., etc. So basic skills, would get you to a certain point, but advanced skills would really get you to meaningful connectivity. So with this kind of notions and outcome expected across the different enablers, we're looking for indicators to measure those different states. So this is the selection of indicators that we have started and we almost completed. But as Alex said, we still have, we still welcome inputs, and we're happy to share all the documents we've put together so far. But basically, we have started identify indicators. We have, for now, about 30 main indicators. Many of those indicators are broken down into sub-indicators, if you will. Think about coverage by a mobile network. That would be your main indicator. A sub-indicator would be coverage, 3G technology, 4G technology, 5G technology. So for every main indicator, we have a host of sub-indicators. So by now, we have about 90 indicators that would be part of the baseline. But there is a sort of parent-child structure where there is a main indicator, and then you can drill down. Same for, let's say, people with a cell phone or a smartphone. We break it down into female and male, so we get more granular. The countries then have more information to target their response with this disaggregated data. So some 30 indicators so far across the different enablers, and a number of additional indicators that we don't think are mature enough at this stage, either because coverage is too limited or the methodology is not advanced enough or finalized enough. So we have many more indicators that we put in a kind of second tier, if you will, not for immediate inclusion, but to keep on a radar. They might be included in the coming years. But for now, we're looking at those 30 plus indicators that would be part of the first baseline. To wrap up, just to show you, to try to make it a bit more concrete, but this is completely made up numbers and a mock-up, even in terms of design. But the idea here is, here's you have some indicators distributed across different enablers, and again, by no means a complete list. But for each of these indicators, the goal would be to have the current value, so the latest value where the country stands today. Then have some sort of target or threshold above which we could claim that a country has reached a state of basic connectivity on that specific enabler, or in the stage of basic connectivity, that's the expected outcome for that specific indicator. And then you have the 2030 target for meaningful connectivity. And you see a progression in the values. So typically, you would expect 80% of the population covered in a state to claim to have reached basic connectivity for mobile network coverage. And let's say you want 98% coverage by 2030 in order to have meaningful connectivity. And again, it's only one indicator will not allow you to to achieve meaningful connectivity. It's just one of the many features that will collectively define meaningful connectivity. But there you see this progression, gap to targets, whether you're on track, look at the trend. So this is all tentative. This is very preliminary, but here you see, hopefully you get the point, is to have this kind of dashboard or scorecard, a bit like what the UN is doing with the SDGs, to see how a country is doing in this journey towards achieving universal and meaningful connectivity. I'll stop here, and again, we welcome your inputs. It's still time. We're looking for indicators to capture all these enablers, including the new ones, the new kids on the block, the unusual suspects of indicators that could enrich our baseline. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Merci beaucoup, Thierry. It's Vint. A couple of things, and then you've left plenty of time for some discussion and interaction. The first question I have is whether you measure you described what looked like internal connectivity inside of this country. But what about its connectivity to the rest of the world? That's equally important, I think, if you're going to make use of the rest of the world's internet for economic and other purposes. So do you measure that as well?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be, I mean, that would be part of the infrastructure. So infrastructure is a very broad and term where we plan to have, international bandwidth and some measures of international connectivity, indeed, with all the caveats that we know.
This can sometimes be a very important triggering event. For example, when Vanuatu got an undersea cable connected to its capital, that made a dramatic difference to the schools there, the universities, and frankly, connectivity for other business purposes. So we should be attentive to that. Second question I had is, what about the role of the low Earth orbiting satellite systems? They're not yet fully functional by any means, so they aren't, tomorrow morning. But you can see the Starlink system coming up with well over 1,000 satellites now. So where does that fit into your connectivity picture? You mentioned mobility largely in the numbers that I was looking at.
No, so this is also we've been in discussion with a number of organizations and business associations around that. So we hope to be able to cover, to include the measures of satellite coverage, or at least plant the seed for future inclusion. There is mobile connectivity, fixed connectivity, but satellite is indeed an important dimension. And it's always, the struggle is always with having, mature enough indicators that covers sufficiently large a number of countries. But that's definitely part of the picture.
So let's see if there are any other questions from the rest of our participants today.
Yes, this is Mei-Lin. Thierry, I put in the chat a couple of things. One is that Indonesia, under the National ICT Council, has a meaningful broadband working group that is operating, and they have indicators, so that would be a good cross-reference for you to see what they've done. And the other one is that the Internet Society has given a grant to the World Data Labs, which is a spin-off from the World Bank, and I'm an advisor to them. The World Data Labs put the proposal to the Internet Society for an internet inequality visualization. And these things are all different ways of looking at the same thing. And so it might be helpful for you to see these independent efforts as you're developing. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, we are also in touch with the Internet Society. They've also provided input, but yeah, on that, the visualization side of things is also useful. And as you see, I think let's not forget, this is meant also to be a call for action, right? So the communication angle is very important. So to gain traction, to be used, to be talked about, we will need to make an effort. But that's further down the line. As a first step, we're going to try to hand a document to the office of the tech envoy. That's the first step. But then, the communication parts and the marketing side of things will be important, and that's where we need to find a compelling way to visualize this baseline and the targets, so it will gain even more traction.
Thank you, Terry. I have 3 hands up right now in the following order: Bob Spohr, Joseph Knoll, and Kristen. I don't know whether that's left over from a previous hand up or it's in one, but you're number 3 on the list. Bob Spohr, you're on.
Hi, Vint. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Alex and Terry. I noticed in the first slide there was a mention of promoting digital public goods. Why isn't that, gaining commitment, right, to digital public goods rather than promoting? And to what extent is, open source public goods reflected in meaningful connection?
I'll take that really quickly. That's another working group, Bob. That's chaired by UNICEF, and I don't know if we have anyone from the SG Roadmaps office. Yuping usually is on these calls. Whether they could give an update on what's happening there.
Got it.
That was an easy one. Keep them going. No, I'm just kidding.
But you're working together, I assume.
No, we have the 8 working groups. It's actually the secretariat that's kind of coordinating everything overall. But yeah, absolutely. That's why I was just wondering if we have anyone from Yuping or colleagues on the call. If they are, they could maybe pipe in.
Jason Manning is from that office, and he could respond. Jason?
Yes, thank you, and thanks for the question. Yes, as Alex mentioned, digital public goods is indeed one of the 8 roundtable or recommendation group areas, and there is a Digital Public Goods Alliance with different stakeholders that works to encourage the adoption of open standards content and open source software. 1 or 2 weeks ago, then they issued a call that related to COVID vaccines that the delivery mechanisms, those also be made open source so that more countries can use them to distribute vaccines. That's just one example of things that they're pushing forward. And it is, like also Alex mentioned, UNICEF is really spearheading a lot of that work. But we'll be providing an update on this recommendation group as well as the recommendation groups in conjunction with the Science Technology Innovation Forum on May 4th. We'll have an event there. We'll just do an update on that. But I'm happy to provide more details to you on that separate.
Okay, yeah, I'll follow up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Jason. Joseph, you have the last word.
Yeah, a short question to Thierry. When we talked to WHO on digitization of health, we got the story back that, folks, you are overloading us. We have already too many requests to the society to answer. Now, when you come up with your 90 or even 30 parameters for the countries, I'm just wondering whether you got similar type of responses.
Well, I mean, in the case of this exercise, the good thing is that ITU is kind of it's very much a data exercise, right? It's a data effort. It's gathering data to paint this picture of the state of connectivity, and ITU is in driving seat because it is the agency in charge of collecting all the data. So we are not we rely on other providers, but not. We hope that we don't, add to the burden of other organizations with requests for more data being produced. Although, I mean, frankly, we could do with more data. There's a lot of gaps in measuring connectivity, despite the topic of ICTs. It's shocking to see how little we know about the state of connectivity in a lot of countries. One reason being that we still very much rely on household survey to know, whether a household has a computer at home or how frequently they use internet. Despite all the progress with big data, we hope to tap into these new sources. But yeah, there is a lot of we don't know. But that's ITU job to try to work with partners to improve the picture. And when it comes to, just to clarify that here we really look at connectivity as the ability to connect to the internet in a meaningful way. We don't say much about what you do online. We will not prescribe a behavior and a digital behavior, or you should do only online banking, education, and health. If someone uses his or her connectivity to do gaming or to do shopping, that's fine. I mean, if it's meaningful to them, we're not going to prescribe away. That's for something else. So we're not going to track the use of digital health. For example, we're really stopping at the connectivity, the ability to connect.
Yeah, the background for the question was rather easy, and that was whenever I go to Ethiopia, Tanzania, Kenya, I get the kind of question, yes, we are here, but what are the next step? What is the framework? So my question is, at one point in time, are we able to use your index or your detailed index to actually link to other countries, other initiatives, and say, hey, that's a very good baseline. And we've seen other countries who on a similar baseline have put out this and that strategy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there is clearly a benchmarking component to it, although we're not looking to aggregate those indicators. Maybe someone else will do it, but for now, it's very much a scorecard as opposed to a one number index. But yes, I mean, obviously, if a country at a similar stage of development has, ticked all the mark on these various indicators, there is something to be learned from them. So it can be the basis for research, for case studies and good practices to be written, and yeah, so it can be also kind of stimulates discussions and learning from each other.
So thank you very much, Thierry and Alex. And thank you for taking the time to answer all the questions as well. We need to move on now to our final presentation, and that's on digital building blocks from Estonia, from Martin. Is it Kaivats? Am I saying right, Martin?
That's perfect. Thank you.
So you look like you're out on the beach. This is amazing.
Yes, I am. In Estonia we can walk and do this meeting, and I was previously biking a lot. So, yeah.
This is, I think we should, this is being recorded, by the way, and so for the record, we should note that Estonia can participate in digital activity from literally anywhere, including on foot at the side of a body of water. So do you have slides, and should we be presenting them, or are you going to talk to us?
No slides.
No slides. Okay.
Yeah, I'll try to explain and talk, and more or less try to explain mainly one initiative, which is GovStack. Just a week ago, we also launched a website. It's govstack.global. And then on the later part, I will try to summon you as the kind of cavalry that is walking right there in the sea to talk about the WHO and the Global Trust Framework things that are going on. But first and foremost, there's another nice view.
Wow, that's absolutely astonishing. You don't see this very often. Horses that walk on water.
Exactly. It's all possible here in Estonia. But I hope that Kate also explained a little bit, but Estonia, Germany, DIAL, and ITU have started a collaboration on digital building blocks. For those advanced users, it's a domain-driven microservice architecture based on asynchronous messaging. But basically, in order to understand it, the main experience comes, of course, from Estonia, and we are getting Singapore involved and other governments. But still, the main problem is that I think many of you, as humans, but also as some of you might be civil servants, have encountered that you once think. Yes.
Martin, I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you suggesting that humans are not civil servants, or that civil servants?
Well, sometimes they are a different breed, and sometimes they speak a different language, which is mainly like civil servants use a set of jargon that no normal person understands, and I can go into that bullshit bingo as well if needed, but I'm trying to be a human rather than a civil servant. But anyways, well, formally I am. I'm National Digital Advisor of Estonia, responsible for everything digital and innovation related in our country, but also working together with Kate, who just posted the link. The website is brand new and it has not too much information, but please do keep your eye on it. And the goal is, like, again, as humans or civil servants or however, you probably ended up in the situation that you've seen something that you want to make it better, but then the computer says no. And then maybe you go to the computer guys and they say, no, this is very difficult to do. We need to do a procurement and that takes a lot of time and whatnot. And this is especially true in the public sector, because like it has its own restrictions, like the procurements and legal and whatnot, and mainly the know-how and capacity of the civil servants themselves. So the goal for the GovStack is basically to build as many reusable building blocks as we can, and making them digital public goods. So the bigger part open sourcing them, but there will also be a marketplace for software as a service, and also as selling some cybersecurity bits and pieces. But the goal and the aim is to basically build these building blocks as kind of Legos. Estonia and India and Singapore and all of the best public sector architects are already working on how to make those basic building blocks interact with each other. So the small little round things that are on Legos. We are currently working a lot on how to figure out those things. And again, the goal is to actually deploy these in low resource settings. We have input from European Commission. We have conceptual input from World Bank and all the leading different people, and trying to build a community that actually believes that reusing these bits and pieces and not inventing the bicycle every time is actually a smart thing to do. And we are going hopefully live. I'm hoping to go live this year, but I'm a professional dreamer. So reality probably says that next year in the Horn of Africa, we try to showcase small use cases like maternal child healthcare and some farmer use cases. But basically it aims to become a kind of a set of guiding design principles based on a created community effort, so that public sector could actually utilize and reuse them. And before it was Vint, I think, asked about the cross-border nature of things. And the goal is that these building blocks would be interoperable from ground up. So that's the mammoth task we've started. We try to make it as small and bits and pieces as possible, and to try to build the kind of Lego bricks that could be reutilized. The long-term goal I hope to get is that, for example, what I can do from the Estonian government side is to keep these principles in all Estonian government's ICT procurements. And we have friends in Finland as well, and Belgium, and maybe in other countries that could utilize these principles and later on open source all of these bits and pieces. So thus building the library of those building blocks, and mainly the capacity and know-how how to put them together. The goal for us is that in, 5 years' time, a random civil servant in a small municipality in Estonia would be able to set up a very simple basic digital service within half an hour or an hour without prior technical know-how. And the same could be done at scale in much larger places, and so on and so forth. I think the world needs transparency and accountability. And that kind of turns me to another topic that I wanted to just flag out. My main heart is currently going on with the GovStack, and there's a lot of community effort being done. But I would like to point out, as there are many UN and other stakeholders here as well, stuff that is going on WHO. I'm also in WHO Digital Health Technical Advisory Group. I have some very serious concerns on the proposed Global Trust Framework, which currently they built on a PKD-based system, which is mainly for biometrical passports. The point and the criticism starts that they will not be able to deploy it in equality. The best practice of ICAO means that maybe they will able to solve the COVID crisis in 35 years. Like, that's not a very reasonable choice. Estonia as a government has proposed an alternative way to it as well, but this is something that is going on currently and we need to solve it. If needed, I can share all the materials, the critical text and all the positive outcomes and versions as well. Let's collaborate together on those things so that we can actually solve this thing. The point is that we actually have a unique opportunity to build a global functioning bureaucracy in very basic layer. And we can do it. There is experience, not only in Estonia, in Singapore, in Germany, in many other places. But we need to seize the momentum and actually like utilize the crisis, or never miss a good crisis, like Winston Churchill said. So we should use it. But yeah, so that's now for me. I think Joseph has a question and hand raised for a while.
Wow, I'm impressed that you could see that. Joseph, you have the floor if you'd like to ask your question. But we're not hearing you right now for some reason. You're still muted. There we go.
Sorry. I also posted the question, just saying that, you know, what we experience a lot of offline, de facto offline locations, bad 3G connections. And so one of the things which I would love to see is to explore the applicability to some rural settings in, you know, Tanzania, Kenya, or Ethiopia, or whatsoever, because that will actually then empower the local societies with the services and have whatever thin line out to the platform needed.
Yeah, one of the things that we are thinking of in Estonia, we have built an open source chatbot, basically a network of chatbots, which we can also connect to SMSs and other things like that, so that you could actually deliver governmental services on a very old school phone, or if you have a smartphone, then you can do even more advanced stuff. But also the low resource, meaning offline setting, is the key here. So totally agree, and that's what we are starting to pilot basically as well.
So thank you very much, Martin, for an extraordinary presentation. I actually have several questions that I'd like to pose for you. The first one has to do with the building blocks themselves. I've been very interested, of course, for years in reusable software, but I want to be cautious about the Lego block metaphor. And the reason for this is that Lego blocks don't require the same kind of maintenance as software does. And so these building blocks will have to be maintained. They will have to maintain backward compatibility. They have to be secure, their security. So there's quite a bit of catering that is required in order to make an open source collection of building blocks useful over long periods of time. I'm sure you've thought your way through that given the previous experience, but I thought I should raise that to get your reaction.
Fully agree with you. I've just had discussions with some top-notch health technology specialists, and they said in a kind of naive way, for what I think it's naive, but it's open source, it's free. No, it's not. Fuck off. Sorry. The point there is that is one of the goals of these organizations as well. And the point would be, like, for example, if Estonian, Belgium, and Finnish government use the same Lego blocks, they can also patch them, upgrade them, and do all of the upgrades to it and share those expenses. So that's one of the goals of these organizations as well, to have those certified blocks. And if one of the governments or anybody uses it and wants to keep it automatically maintained as well, then the platform could also facilitate that as well.
I'm sure that you'll experience what I've always experienced, which is that innovative people will discover ways in which they want to expand the functionality. Not all of them go in the same direction, and maintaining the stability is a challenge. Kristen has her hand up, so let's see what Kristen has to say.
Hi there. Now with my IEEE hat on, I just want to put it out there that IEEE has what's called the Standards Association Open Source. It's SA Open. It's the first standards association to have this kind of platform. Open source is definitely not in my wheelhouse. So I just wanted to put that out there. There's a lot going on, a lot of interest on the philanthropic side. Also, there's a whole community in which you can develop standards with this open source platform. And of course, it's IEEE is going to be around for a very long time. So there's this that's happening, and I just wanted to mention that if it at all helps in the facilitation of anything. There's been a lot of excitement around the platform, and it's in early days, but that's all. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
I just would comment that I'm probably the new guy on the block here, and with this kind of a bit of a naive enthusiasm, tried to handle the same things everybody has been thinking about for many years. But on the case of IEEE, we've already been in discussions both with May-Lin, but also Konstantinos and Alpesh, and are already working on those issues. The point is that open source is actually, like you all know, about community building and creating a vibe that actually everybody also enjoys. I do understand Vince's point about all the creative minds might stir off in various different directions, but then it's their problem. But if we can keep some of the core live, because sorry, all the public sector, they think they are like unique snowflakes, that their particular processes are very unique and nobody else can do it, which we all know in reality, this is just stupid routine bureaucracy that can be fairly easily automated. And if we can do some of these core governmental functions, then I think it's like for the good of everybody, because none of us wants to stay behind the computer for the most of life, because there's a difference between private sector services and government. If the private sector wants you stay in this bloody Google chat as long as possible, then public sector, the incentive is vice versa. The less time you spend with public sector, the happier you are. So that might give you the direction that we are trying to kind of steer towards.
I think a lot of people that want to reduce the size of government would agree with you. Let's see, Joseph, did you want to say something?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Yeah,
just enjoying Martin, because we have with Peter Fagerholm and Mert, we have this discussion between the economy-driven Estonian versus the socialist-driven Finnish and Norwegians. And that is really something which we can take over beer, because then you really come to the basis for it, but not now.
All true. Thank you so much, Martin, for an extraordinary presentation. One which is, for me anyway, triggered many thoughts. We have an opportunity for people who haven't had a chance to introduce themselves to do so. May-Lin usually knows who the newcomers are. So May-Lin, if you'd like to pick up on that, we have some time left before we have to finish up.
I will. I would like to invite Alex Grech to introduce himself. He's been very active on chat and everybody wants to know who you are, Alex. You're on mute if you're talking.
So sorry about that. Yeah, I got to know about this literally this afternoon, probably about 30 minutes before you started, because my colleague Martaro from Estonia, and we're talking about stuff, small, crazy countries. I happen to be based in Malta, which is this tiny island in the middle of the world there. But we've been doing some stuff on blockchain and credentials and I guess in the EU, where I'm also working on, for example, this idea of building blocks, the EU is rolling out a whole series of applications around the European Blockchain Partnership. And I'm one of those people who keeps on telling geeks, just because you build it, it doesn't mean that they will come. In other words, you can be stopped when you're looking at anything which needs to operate on a public sector basis, which is what Martin is talking about there. Okay, you can be blocked by somebody whose notion of, decentralization is completely against his or her idea of governance, which is control. And you can get into the world of politics and stuff like that. So for me, a lot of what I've heard today really resonates. I keep on thinking we need some sort of community of practice based on praxis, but based on people who have got their hands dirty, like Martin, like I had to in my country, to work from prime ministers down to, data protection commissioners telling me you're breaking the law by doing something about blockchain because of GDPR and stuff like that. So sorry, that's who I am anyway.
Thank you. It's great to have you, Alex. I'm glad Matt brought you. Justin Bryant from the People-Centered Internet. Justin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Justin. I'm operations lead for PCI. It's great to be here. Great to be talking to all of you about these very important and pressing topics. Alex, what you just said resonates with me. I've done a lot of research in GDPR and its application extraterritorially to other nations. And with the emerging tech that's developing in some of these countries, they really need to develop a workaround in terms of blockchain, because that is very problematic at this time.
I'm very proud of Justin being on the board of PCI. He has a master's degree from Chinese university, from an Austrian university, and he's currently getting his law degree at Stanford.
Yay!
So, Justin. Yes,
Yeah.
as an alma mater.
Yeah, yes, I mean, beat Cal.
Yolanda Mar-Ginsing.
Thanks, Mei-Lin. I work in Robert Ops team. So for the digital transformation framework and reference model that Rob was mentioning earlier, I lead that work. So I support the country office directly on that front, and happy to share more in the future. Thank you.
Yolanda. That would be wonderful.
I think that is the newcomers, and now we're just open for anyone who wants to make comments before Vint wraps it up at 25 past the hour.
So floor is open for, I see that, Kristen, you still have your hand up, but that might be left over from an earlier comment. So
yes, sorry about that, Vint. I just took it down.
No problem. I wanted to just show I'm attentive to that. Are there any other comments from anyone who would like to draw our attention to something?
Vint, it's Jane. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the fact that we're making traction on community networks, bottom-up networks to change people's lives and provide connectivity. But we are seeing a bit of a movement to suggest that those are insignificant. So that's probably coming from some of the equipment manufacturers on 5G, and we're working hard to work with them to understand that process. But know that there's a lot of great change going on, from liberalization of the 6 gigahertz band in Saudi, Guatemala, Brazil, and other places. And so we're really pushing for open unlicensed spectrum. And so if anyone wants to join the cause, just give me a shout, because we're looking for some generic talking points for all those folks that want to promote diversity of infrastructure, redundancy, and resiliency.
Thanks so much, Jane. Let me reinforce what you're saying on 2 grounds. The first one is that often countries, including the US, choose to sell spectrum for a one-shot. This may look good on the surface, but then what happens is that the acquirers, at great expense, may just sit on the spectrum and not use it. And their purpose is to prevent anyone else from using it. I'm not just saying that all such transactions have that character, but some of them do. So that's the first point. The second one is that the government doesn't actually realize the benefit of the use of the spectrum, which often translates into taxes against either hardware or services that rely on that spectrum. So if you look at Wi-Fi, it is a continuing deliverer of tax revenue for decades now. As opposed to a one-shot with the sale of spectrum. Finally, the technology has gotten so much better with regard to spectrum sharing. It used to be that receivers were really crappy, and that meant that you had to put a lot of pressure on the transmitters to keep them in band. And that was expensive, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now we have smart receivers, and the fact that we can do beam forming and a variety of other tricks allow us to permit spectrum sharing to be effective. So in my view, you're right on target to argue that we should think about spectrum differently than we have in the past. There may be others who are on the call who can speak to this more knowledgeably than I can. So if are there any other comments? Lynn Wells, you're actually on my display right now, which suggests that you wanted to say something. I see your hand is up, so why don't you go ahead, and then we'll have Joseph and Martin. Oh,
thank you, Ben. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I would just like to say that the PCI is very pleased to have been awarded from the Internet Society Foundation a grant last week to help build digital capacity in Native American communities. And the elements of that were very much aligned with Kate's cake and recipe, in that we're trying to build sociology together with technology, and recognizing that it starts with listening to the community rather than going in there with a solution that you thought ahead of time. So we hope to integrate the Hasso-Plattner Institute at Potsdam and their design thinking approaches in the process. We very much look forward to it.
That's great news. Joseph.
Yeah, I just want to pick up the comment from Mylin and yourself on the academic networks, and the story from Jane on the community networks, and link that together with a comment from Bob on the impact graph for education. Because what we currently see is that academia has understood it, and academia needs to reach out to the community, because what we see more and more is this demand from academia to actually make the change and not just have theoretical knowledge. So we are working with 5 universities in Ethiopia to turn that curriculum into an innovative curriculum for the society and not for the top research. And in that one, of course, connectivity, network building is part of the whole exercise. So I'd really would love at one point in time to bring these topics together and say that, hey, come on, we have the universities, the community networks, we have the curriculum. If we pack that together and make a nice package out of it, then we can help lots of universities to actually turn into a direction which will then help the digital transformation.
That would be a consummation devoutly to be wished. Martin, you're going to have the last comment in the last couple of minutes.
So just to comment on Joseph's point, actually I'm running Tallinn Digital Summit that will happen in September. That will be a lot about ethical finances of connectivity. So how to make the connectivity ethical. So that's one of the things that might resonate with Joseph's point. And also just quick note, if anybody wants to know actually about those WHO and the GovStack, just hit me up in LinkedIn and I will share all the materials, what I have, and let's work on together. And the WHO one is very time constrained, because things are going out in a faster pace than the bureaucracy in Geneva usually, and we can actually make a significant impact. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Martin. And so I'd like to follow up with you on the WHO situation too, so watch for email. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again for this meeting. We have another one, of course, coming up in May. There isn't much time to try to summarize, so I'm not going to try to do that, except to say that you can see the richness of what's going on a global scale here. It feels like this decade, despite its painful beginnings, may in fact turn out to be one of the most important in the evolution of digital technology and its application. So I look forward to seeing all of you next time, and thank again Mei-Lin for organizing this and staying up so late in Singapore. So see you all on the net.
Thank you, Vint, for your leadership, your guidance.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm just copying.